All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Lou Bryson and Liz Rhoades. Plus, this week we have special guest Christian Krogstad of Westward Whiskey. I'm going to let your host give a more formal introduction in a moment and hopefully not fumble over the name of his brand. But before I turn things over, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co. And as always, just want to point out a couple of ways you can interact with your hosts throughout the live stream today. So on your right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to just give a little hello. Let us know where you're joining us from out there in the world. If you have a question at any point during the show, there's a little button at the bottom of your screen that says ask a question. So just click that, enter your question in. I'll be keeping an eye out for those throughout the show and relaying them to your hosts and their guests over here. And last but not least, feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top right that makes it easy to do that. But with all of those items out of the way, Liz, Lou, I will turn things over to you now.
Thank you, Will. Welcome, everybody. I'm doing the intros today because Christian Krogstad is my guest. Invited him. I've been out to Westward a couple of times. So we brought him on today to talk to us about malt and brewing and all that jazz. To start off, though, I am Lou Bryson. I'm a whiskey writer. I've been doing that for, coming up on 30 years now. I was the managing editor of Whiskey Advocate magazine for 20 years, and I am the author of Whiskey Masterclass and Tasting Whiskey, two excellent books which you should all rush out and buy immediately. Today I am drinking, appropriately, a Westward whiskey. This is a release from the Westward Club, an exclusive club that we will probably ask you a little bit about because you can join that. This is a single barrel selection of a whiskey made with chocolate malted rye. And as I told Christian in the pre-show, I selected this one specially. In fact, I went looking for it when I found out he was going to be on because I just think it's an exceptional whiskey and has some really interesting characteristics that we're going to talk about. But before we do that, Liz?
You got the...
I did! I got it right on the down and the woo!
Killing it.
Yeah!
There we go. Okay, thank you.
It only took 3 years, you know.
So I'm super excited. So I'm actually at work. So I'm at the Whistle Pig Farm Distillery today. So you could probably guess by the backdrop. I've got this interesting halo thing happening. So we're just gonna roll with that. So hey everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. I have over a decade of experience in the alcoholic beverage industry, working on quite a different range of spirits, product types spanning across the globe at this point, and including beer, rum, vodka. But my particular favorite and expertise, of course, is this guy.
Yeah, it is.
Whiskey. I spent most of my career at a tiny little mom and pop shop known as Diageo, but am now very fortunate again to be head of whiskey development at Whistle Pig Whiskey, and also run a little side gig as well called Spirit Safe Consulting. And that's a little bit about me. Unfortunately, I don't have any Westward with me, but since I am at the farm, I've got one of our latest releases here, which is our piggyback bourbon and our little cute piggy.
Wow, that is some spout.
Spout snout. So I am, before I kick it back to you, Lou, quick question. Might someone be able to purchase we're coming up on holiday season, right? So we will be able to purchase your 2 books through what channel?
You can get them on Amazon. You can always get them on Amazon. But if you check my Twitter account, I have a pinned tweet at the top. It's just at Lou Bryson, where it tells you how you can buy it directly from me and get it signed. And no kidding, I make 10 times as much. So that'd be awesome for me. So if you want to do that, yeah.
everyone do that.
Yeah, do that.
Awesome. And because just we're being fun today, I'm wearing an Ardbeg shirt.
Oh,
Ardbeg Day 2022. So shout
hardcore.
out to one of our little cousin distilleries across the pond. But yeah, Lou, we'll kick it over to you to.
Okay. Awesome. I've been out to Westward. I've seen Christian a couple of times, and I've interviewed him for other things, including aquavit, which I'm going to apologize now. We're going to talk about. But I'd again, as Liz says, Christian, he has a wide range of experience. He's worked at a winery. He's worked at he's founded breweries. I suspect you may have been at Edgefield when I visited. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was maybe. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. Honestly, I can't remember what year it was.
Yeah, I ran the brewery there. Gosh, like 2000 to 2002, something like that.
It's probably
2003.
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah,
my
fuzzy,
memory, right? for dates
Yeah.
is kind of fuzzy. A couple of years in there,
Cool,
in the early aughts.
Yeah. I mean, some great beers came out of there. I know I drank quite a few of them when I was there that weekend. Although I was actually there for the little distillery.
Yeah.
But you can't be at the distillery all day. Anyway, that's where you are now. You are at Westward, and you founded that as well.
So I apologize for any sort of noises. We have trains that go by.
We did hear a train earlier.
I'm sure somebody will come running through on fire and screaming.
We're in the same boat. We're in the same boat. Yeah. So you're all good.
Yeah, all I have is a dog to worry about. I think
simple. You guys are guilting me into having a whiskey here.
Peer pressure.
Yeah, I'm gonna have the wheat wine double oak from.
Ooh.
Yeah.
See, that's just damn. Yeah. So the question we always ask our guests is, how did you wind up at Westward? What was the path?
The path is a long path. Oh man.
Yeah, it was.
So I started out. I grew up in Seattle mostly, and in the 1980s was there. I had a front row seat for the sort of the birth of the craft brewing movement. I would have my older brothers buy me Red Hook from the gas station on Leary Way there.
Oh my God! Wow.
Back in 83. Rather than I mean, I love Rainier Ale, but I would prefer the Red Hook ESB or Ballard Bitter that was coming out of there. That was a great beer. And I got into home brewing, and I just love the stories. I love the packaging. I love the differentiation of the imports and craft beers. I mean, that was I happened to grow up like less than a mile from like the first grocery store that brought in Charlie Finkel's Merchant de Vin beers, Larry's Market down in White Center. And so
nice.
I just was really lucky to have been exposed to.
That was the place to be.
Something other than, I don't know, American industrial lager. And so I started home brewing in the mid 80s. Really enjoyed it. Wasn't really doing anything. When I felt a calling to be like productive in my life when I was about 24, I moved to Portland. So I moved to Portland in 1990, started knocking on doors, got an apprenticeship, got into a brewery right away at McMenamins. So starting in the spring of 91, I was the brewer at the Hillsdale Brew Pub, which is McMenamins, their first property. So it was a great place.
So you went looking for this on the. I mean, your resume was essentially I homebrewed for a long time.
Yeah.
Fair?
And I was pretty much.
Okay.
And
right.
and I moved. I decided to move to Portland because in 1990 there were more breweries in Portland than anywhere. There were like 14 breweries here. Now there's 90 or 90. But I just figured I'd go where the breweries were. There were a lot of small breweries. I was enthusiastic. I made a good impression, I guess, and so they hired me. Exactly. My resume was a lot like most people who were getting into brewing then. Like,
Yeah.
There weren't people.
Here's what I
quitting.
made.
Yeah, there weren't people who had 30 years as plant manager at Miller Coors, trying to get a job at a 5-barrel brewery in suburban Portland.
Yeah, I mean, they were Burt Grant. They were going out and opening their own. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So so I got into brewing. I went after a couple years. I went to that Siebel diploma program there in Chicago, '93. I think I was there. Really enjoyed that. That was a great. I kind of refer to that as like finishing school for brewers. They assume that you know how to brew already. And it kind of gives you a good baseline of technical knowledge of all aspects of brewing. And then about a year after that, I started a brewery up in Bellingham called Orchard Street Brewery. It was fantastic. It was a great learning experience. It was a brutal character building experience, and did that for about 7 years. Then came back to Portland, managed Edgefield Brewery, and that's where I got exposed to whiskey. And I'd always loved whiskey, but it hadn't really occurred to me that I could do it because getting into brewing, I got into brewing because I saw it, I could visualize it. I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. And so I went and did it. And then it wasn't until at Edgefield where the owners brought in a still and started making whiskey, and I was helping make the wash for that and kind of hanging out and
I mean, they were by no means the first one, but they were way early.
I think they got that still in maybe 2000 or 1999, something like that.
Yeah. And what were there? Maybe 10 small distilleries in the country?
Yeah, maybe 15.
Okay.
So I got to hang out and participate in that, and eventually I was like, well, shit, I can do this. And so so I left. Conveniently, I got fired, and so that I was able to collect unemployment while I started my distillery.
One door closes, another opens, right?
Yeah. And after a little while, I did go and get a job. I managed a winery down in Willamette Valley in Carlton, sort of a co-op winery. So I was for about 2.5 years the production manager, general manager of that facility, helping people organize their harvests, and it was sort of like a co-op winery called the Carlton Winemaker Studio. And so I wasn't actually I wasn't a winemaker in that I wasn't making the creative decisions on the wine. I was running the bottling line. I was coordinating all the tank space and the barrel warehouse and so forth to support the winemakers.
That sounds like a pretty damn useful experience.
Sip of whiskey to clear my palate.
While you're doing that, just circling back to Siebel, right? So, and I think another piece to that is, now there are a lot of educational programs out there in brewing and now distilling as well. But just Siebel's awesome. Shout out to John Hanoffen, who's now their director of education there. Is running a great program as always. And anyway, that was just my quick little
shout out. I think Dr. Ryder, I think, was the head of education when I was there. He was from Miller. He's the man who invented Miller Clear. We have him to thank for that.
I actually have an empty bottle of that on a shelf somewhere because I considered it
it's
the high water mark of that craziness. Little did I realize how wrong I was at the time. But Wow, yeah.
Anyway,
since we
so that's
stopped for
when
a second,
I
actually, I wanted to
started the
jump
distillery.
in a little thing there.
Yeah.
I remember someone saying to me back when small distilling, craft distilling, whatever you want to call it, was just getting started, saying that in America they were handicapped because while home brewing was legal, home distilling was not. And they had the brewers had a much deeper bench of, I mean, at least started talent like you had.
Yeah,
Whereas,
right. And I mean, people were home distilling, just like, I mean, I think home brewing was illegal until like 78 or something, right?
Yeah.
Didn't that get legalized in the Carter administration?
70, yeah, I guess it was
I think
78.
it was during the Carter.
78.
Anyway,
there's a lot of weird regs too. So this is a fun. I'm going to throw a fun fact in here. So LDA right here also, we have a higher LDA than pretty much everyone. So legal drinking age. Sorry if you're not familiar with that acronym. 21, but you can homebrew at 18.
You know, in Pennsylvania, you can own a bar at 18.
Yep.
Which what the shit?
And I
anyway, sorry.
And why I know that reg. Totally didn't consume it. That's fine.
So, how did you get from the winery to where you?
So I left McMenamins. I was, Edgefield. I was planning on starting a distillery. In fact, the fellow who is the distiller there, Lee Medoff, and I kind of hatched the idea together, and he stayed there for a couple years, kept his day job and somehow managed to do both. But we sort of pooled our resources, scraped together $65,000 to start our distillery.
Wow.
Which obviously, isn't going to get you very far. But our intent was to make single malt whiskey, but you can't keep the lights on very long with that amount and fill barrels and so forth. So we made some clear spirits to pay the bills. We did some contract manufacturing for other people. We helped several other companies get started during that time. We started my namesake, Krogstad Aquavit, which I still have. We started a gin brand called Aviation Gin that we sold a couple of years ago to another little company, little startup.
Never heard of it. Never heard of it.
And kept kind of shoulder to the wheel, nose to the grindstone, whatever you want to call it. Just kept filling barrels, and eventually had a release. I think our first whiskey release was maybe in. I wish I kept a diary.
Yeah.
I think it was in 2008 was our first whiskey release.
Still pretty early.
That went really well. Yeah, I tried to count at one point. So when we got started, our sort of date of first sale was in August of 2004. And I think that there were about 30 to 35 what we would call craft distilleries in the country at that point. In summer 2004. So it's grown a little bit since then.
Yeah, where are we now? The last number I heard was 2,100. It's got to be more than that now.
Yeah. Seems like that was,
Eric Owens is on. So he says 1978. No, that's.
It's got to be.
No.
That's the home brewing thing.
Yeah, that's.
So Eric, if you hear us, we're looking for a number.
Yeah, I'm guessing 2,400, 2,500 maybe.
Yeah.
I remember Bill Owens telling me it would never be more than 300, and I cherish that.
Still short of the 7,000 breweries, but
I think it's more like 9 now.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Yeah,
that's an old number.
Yeah, that's just
my
crazy.
number is 2 years old.
2,200. Okay.
2,200 DSPs, he says.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
Not too shabby.
Yeah. So we're one of them.
Yeah. I mean, not a small one.
Yeah. So in fact,
there you go.
yeah,
There were
I am-
24 in 2004.
24 in 2004.
Yeah, right.
And,
Oh, wow.
and you were one of
Oh,
them.
yeah, wait a minute. Lean over again.
Oh, yeah. Sorry,
I'm
there's
just
a
looking at
distillery.
I'm looking at the W back there on the
So,
still.
yeah.
Very nice.
Let's see. There's a
Oh
there's
yeah,
a
look at that.
Here, the stripping still there. That's a 3,100 gallon Von Dome pot.
Nice.
Some bottles here, some tanks. You know,
Yeah.
just a convenient location to have a talk. Nice to have a backdrop.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
W's. I've got W's.
As I pointed out before the show, this is a fake picture, but it is a picture I just took this weekend. So, new covered bridge.
So I will say, and pointing out, just obviously super impressive with you guys, but I wanted to point out how clean it is back there.
Oh,
Yes.
And I think if this is an appropriate segue, most of your team, right, are brewers.
former brewers, yeah. Current brewers, actually, since we make beer. And
Well,
that really is our philosophy is like, we're not making whiskey wash, we're making beer and then distilling it. And that's really our attitude. Obviously, whiskey wash is beer, but, you know.
yeah, I mean, it is, right, even in right, bourbon, so grain whiskey production, right? It is called a beer still.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
Not getting hung up on, yeah.
Yeah, but
and I mean, most places they call the person who makes the wash the brewer. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So we are, as you said, we're a bunch of ex-brewers. That is really I'm an ex-brewer, and that was really getting started. Our philosophy for you know, what we wanted to do is, I mean, having grown up in the early days of the brewing movement, you know, what I saw was, you know, early on in 90 or 82, 83, 84, most of the breweries that were starting up were really trying to emulate classic European beers. And that's great because, you know, that's what they had. That's what inspired them to start their brewery. That's what they had as a reference point. But, you know, if you want a Burton-on-Trent Pale Ale, you can go buy a Burton-on-Trent Pale Ale. You know, or if you want a Bavarian Hefeweizen, you know, you can buy the import. So it really wasn't until the industry kind of started creating its own styles, and really, to my mind, the first to really articulate that they were not making a European style was Sierra Nevada with their pale ale. You know, the American pale ale made with American hops. It was intended to be served cold and carbonated the way, you know, it was made for the American palate, which was accustomed to cold carbonated beers, but suddenly the palate wanted a little more malt, a little more sweetness, a little more bitterness, a little more hop flavor. And so, so that was, you know, a lesson I really took to heart. And so, like, when I started working on developing a gin, I didn't necessarily know at the beginning what it was going to be, what it was going to be. I knew it wasn't going to be London dry gin, because the world really didn't need another London dry gin. I mean, I drink the hell out of Beefeater, but I'm not going to, you know, it already exists. Likewise, you know, I love Scotch. I drink the hell out of a lot of different Scotches, but the world does not need a Scotch made in America. What we were hoping to do was to, you know, bring something new, create new flavors, new attitudes about whiskey, about single malt, you know, very much in the vein of, you know, the American craft brewing experience. So how do you do that, you know? And so instead of leaning on Scottish techniques and you know, peated malts and so forth, we really leaned on our brewing experience and sort of recognized that by using an ale yeast, fermenting at a nice cool temperature, producing a largely defect-free beer that we can then have just sort of concentrate that instead of cleaning it up. It doesn't need to be cleaned up. So we have very low reflux stills. I mean, you can see, not to make too fine a point of it, but that the swan's neck on our beer, 3,100 gallon beer still
downward.
is downward. It's also quite a short path to follow. And very little reflux in that still. So we are collecting a lot more of the congeners, the flavors, all the poop that you get in that beer, and from the yeast. The yeast.
I see what you did there.
The metabolic byproducts of the
excrement
fermentation,
yeah,
and all those precursors to the amino acids in the anyway, and so that's why the Westward then is so kind of rich and flavorful, is that we're starting with a very clean beer, a delicious. I mean, I think you probably both tried our beer out of our fermenters. I sort of describe it as being somewhat like Fin de Monde from Unibrew, or maybe Duvel, kind of like a strong Belgian strong golden ale. That's why we clean. We boil the wash to sanitize it. It's a sanitary process, aseptic, I guess you could call it.
I'll have to admit, I was shocked to find out that most distillers don't.
Yeah, I think most distillers welcome a bit of a co-ferment, let's call it.
So I'll jump on this. So yeah, I'm actually in the position of So again, I haven't been shy about terroir and whiskey. This is a polarizing topic, right? We know this. I firmly believe in it. We believe in it here at Whistle Pig, obviously. But one of the pieces that I like to talk about, and again, you get 20 different distillers in a room, and you're going to get 20 different.
At least.
At least. Like, yeah, that's true. At least. But I am a firm believer in micro terroir. And I think, so again, just saying brewer to distiller, right? So also started out as a brewer. And I actually, again, referred to distilling and whiskey as the beer afterlife, if you will. Because that's a fun way to put it. However, one of the things that I retrained myself on, and again, you guys didn't. You stayed true to brewing roots, which is great, right? But I think it's important to have that co-fermentation. So whether that's lactic acid bacteria or wild yeast, for example, I really believe in that as a true thumbprint of what the flavor profile is going to be. And I'll just relate it back to, Scotland, for example, where there's about 5 approved barley strains.
Oh, right.
That they're allowed to use. And everyone's pretty much using the same cultured yeast strain.
Yeah.
So and you either peat it or you don't. Well, no, there's levels of peating, but that's about it.
That's a lever of flavor, right?
Yep.
But also, we're talking wooden washbacks. We're talking, different climates, and I think all of that micro terroir, the different, bacterial strains, lactic acid bacteria, whether it's Brevis, Plantarum, Delbracchi, etc. Hopefully not PDO. Because
Sour whiskey.
we don't like, no one should like PDO. And for those of you not familiar here, PDO predominantly produces a compound called diacetyl,
Whiffy.
which
Sarcina sickness, I think they used to call it.
okay, yeah,
Really?
Yes.
it's buttered popcorn, but because of
There goes.
the volatility in the boiling point, it's almost impossible to remove fully in distillation, even in vodka.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's not PDO.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's some PDO in there, but it's very slow growing.
Yeah.
So lactobacillus has a doubling rate of like every 90 minutes or something, whereas Pediococcus has a doubling rate of like 8 hours or more. It's
versus
much so if you versus like 90 minutes or something
and then
for lactobacillus.
Yeast is
So
what's yeast? 20 minutes.
Yeah,
6. Holy
pretty
shit!
fast.
Saccharomyces cerevisiae,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah,
But you're right.
but the point is that if you're brewing doing a wash, fermenting it and getting it in the still within 4 days or something like that, even if you have a Pediococcus, unless you have a massive infection, you're not going to taste it. The problem is if something happens and you've got to sit, the beer's got to sit in the fermenter for an extra few days.
Can make a difference.
Then you're screwed. Yeah. So that's why we there's a number of reasons why we sanitize.
Again, I'm offering a counterpoint. Yeah. That's all.
Yeah, and we find that we get quite a bit of flavor nuances from the Saccharomyces cerevisiae that we use. And that's the path that we explore. Now, that being said, we do experiment quite a bit. We're filling about 1,200 barrels a year, and we're doing a wash every day, or we're doing 3 washes every day. We're producing about 3,100 gallons of wash a day, and so one of our most popular, successful experiments has been with microflora, micro terroir, as you call it, the local microflora, where when there's a local sort of famous sourdough operation here called Ken's Artisan, and I was sitting around drinking one night, as one does, with Ken. And he was like, "Hey, could you make whiskey with a levain, which is the sourdough starter?" And I don't see why not. And so the next day he showed up with a liter jar of his levain, and we cultured it up. We have a yeast brink and culturing, yeast propagator. So we built it up, and that is really, there is nothing more representative of the local microflora than a sourdough starter. Because it just goes and goes, and
taste of place.
Yeah, and it made a fantastic whiskey. It made a disgusting beer, but it made a fantastic whiskey. So
very cool.
I think that's an excellent point, and I know you guys experiment a ton, and I think that's also right, beer afterlife, so brewing versus distilling, and there's a lot of different levers that you can draw from, of course. So
we use different yeast,
like malt.
Like malt, sure.
I
exactly.
just wanted to get there. I really Sorry.
So we're fortunate here.
Yes, good. Thank you. I wanted to bring this up.
The Pacific Northwest is where most of the 2-row malting barley is grown in the country. It's also the ag school in Washington and the ag school in Oregon each have fantastic malt breeding programs. We got Pat Hayes right here in Oregon.
I mean, can we? Yeah.
Yeah, we can take a moment to recognize Pat Hayes. He's awesome. Yeah, and so there's a lot of there's a lot of innovation happening in beer. There's a lot of innovation happening in whiskey. There's a lot of innovation happening in malting, and a lot of innovation happening in malt breeding. And the one that's the breed that's just coming around. I'm really excited about this Oregon Promise, which is Pat Hayes' creation. We had our first commercial harvest this summer in July of a couple hundred acres, and grown in the Willamette Valley, which is malting barley's come back to the Willamette Valley. It's been 60 years or something since.
Wow.
Used to be cultivated quite a bit here, but so that's an exciting development. But then Great Western Malting is just across the river, the Columbia, in Vancouver, Washington, just essentially a suburb of Portland, and they started up in 1933. Originally, they were supplying malt for the regional breweries, the Rainier, Blitz Weinhardt, Olympia, Lucky, and so forth. But as those regional breweries started to close down, they had an open mind, and Ken Grossman came to them, and in a pickup truck in 1982 or something, and said, "Hey, can I buy some malt from you?" And they didn't ridicule him and send him packing. They sold him some malt, and they are now, I would say the primary supplier of malt to craft beer and whiskey. They, at their Vancouver maltings, they produce something like 40 SKUs now, 40 different commercial batches, styles of malt, anywhere from roasted malts, Vienna, Munich, wheat malt, and so forth, because their customers are always looking for new flavors, new attitudes. And so what you have in your bottle is something they produced originally in their. So they made quite an investment in. They call it their Malt Innovation Center, MEC.
This is what I wanted to get to. I was just astounded by this.
So they have a small malting facility there where they can do testing, and they are constantly testing. And they have a brewery, a little, I think it's like a 1-barrel pilot brewery as well, so that they can use it.
Trial.
And so they malted some rye, then they threw it in their roaster to basically produce like a 200 or 250 SRM or Lava Bond. I can't remember now. Anyway, fairly like a chocolate malt, not a roast malt, but something that you would make porter with, for instance. And they were like, "Hey, you want to play around with this?" And Andrew, who's the head of production here, he basically filled out a pallet with, I think, just like 3 bags of it. I think that in total it only represents about 3% of the grist of the malt bill in that whiskey. But it sure comes through with this like amazing, like white peach nectarine kind of.
I guess I was amazed at how much it came across in the distillation. Yeah. But if it's coming across in the brewing like that, that's wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
No,
it definitely comes across in the.
Yeah.
This is amazing stuff.
Yeah. And obviously, we can't call it single malt because it's got malted rye.
Yeah.
But we call it 2 malts. Because we're creative like that.
Yeah.
We've got a double malt. which is
Oh.
confusing, I think. But yeah,
Be confusing.
Can we agree on 2 malts then?
Well,
Well, that's part of like the creation of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission, is like, if we
Yeah.
all use the same term,
right?
then it makes it easier for the media, and it makes it easier for the retailers, so that they're not using 2 different terms, because originally, people were using terms like Colorado whiskey or Oregon single malt or whatever. And we all got together and said, no, it's all American single malt. Let's use the same term. And so if you're using something other than malted barley, can we call it 2 malts?
Are we gonna?
This is a
Are we
plea
gonna
right here.
spearhead this?
What's that? Yeah, let's. It's time. I mean, I haven't had
heard it here first.
Yeah, exactly.
We both have time.
Well,
right?
there's that sip of knowledge marketing
Totally.
bump coming in.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, just speaking to Great Western and the pilot and R&D program over there, they're of course amazing. I think Terry still is.
She just retired.
Just retired.
Yeah, but yeah, I was going to mention that Terry Farndorf, who was, one of the OG craft brewers. I think she started.
Pink
she
Food
worked at.
Society.
Pardon?
Founder of Pink Food Society. Sorry, I have to.
Founder of the Pink Food Society.
Here, I have to.
I mean, I think she started brewing at not Big Time, the one down in Berkeley, brew pub down in Berkeley, that they started Big Time in Seattle. Anyway, I mean, she started brewing down in Berkeley in 1988 or 86 or something like that, and then started up Steelhead Brewing in Eugene, Oregon, in maybe 1989 or 90 or something like that.
I remember being so excited when Steelhead beers started showing up in Pennsylvania. I was just over the moon. Yeah.
So, and then she got this position at the Malt Innovation Center at Great Western, kind of leading giving them the perspective of, well, then what do you do with the malt? Sure, you can make malt all you want, but if the brewers don't know what to do with it,
applications.
So that was an example of how sort of forward-thinking Great Western is, that they made that investment to hire someone with her knowledge and experience to help develop their brands, their products, and we work closely with them. We get a lot of, our base malt is from them. Most of what we use is a high color pale ale malt. So somewhat like what a British, like a highly modified British ale yeast or ale malt.
Yeah.
Biscuity, nutty.
Biscuity. There you go. That's the word.
And
so can we slip in just a little aquavit talk here?
Oh yeah.
We get away from. Is that okay?
About malt, but that's okay.
I don't want to slip it away. We'll circle back.
Go ahead. We'll circle back.
All right.
You asked the next question, Lynn.
So, why do you make aquavit?
Well, you'll notice that my name is the same as the brand name of the aquavit.
Yes.
And it is a Norwegian name. I grew up eating the pickled herring and the smoked cod roe and so forth, and drinking the various aquavits that go so well with it. I
believe during an interview you actually said, why would you eat pickled herring any other way?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've turned a lot of people into pickled herring eaters who didn't think that they would be, by applying a little bit of aquavit. Anyway, so we were coming up to the holidays of was it 2006? So late 2006. O.P. Anderson had pulled out of the market. Oregon's a control state, so it can take some time to get certain products on the shelves. O.P. Anderson had pulled out of the U.S., I think, in the early aughts, which is the Danish or the Swedish aquavit brand, the biggest. and then the Danish brand Aalborg
On board.
had just recently been purchased by Arcus, which is the big Norwegian company that produces Linea, and they realigned distribution, which, of course, as any of you in the industry know, means shortages, outages. Distributors pull products. So Aalborg was out, and then there was some distribution issue. Probably a container of Linea was, stuck in a customs lockup in New Jersey because the proper bribe hadn't been paid. And so coming out, November of 2006, there was no aquavit on the shelves. I panicked. And we thought, well, what the hell? We've got stills. We had never thought of making aquavit because even though we, I was making gin and whiskey, but aquavit's such a small niche brand or category that it never occurred to us to actually make it until we couldn't buy it. And so we made some really just for ourselves. We kept it around the distillery, and when writers or bartenders came to visit us, we'd trot out our crazy stuff to have people try. And enough, especially bartenders, told us that if we'd bottle it, they'd buy it. That we kind of took them up on that. I think.
That's promising.
Yeah,
right.
And they did. It worked out really well. It's still out there in the market. We don't really push it. It's kind of I would
think it would be hard to know where to push on a
yeah,
like that.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is it's kind of the darling of a lot of the sort of cool kid bartenders. So one of the first supporters was Jim Meehan, who's a very famous bartender. Back before PDT, he was managing the bar at the Gramercy Tavern in Manhattan.
Yep.
And right after we released, and he was one of the ones who said, if you bottle this for me, I'll buy it. I visited him there. I think they had 9 total cocktails on the list, and 3 of them were made with Krogstad aquavit. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was great
awesome.
at Gramercy. And people like Toby Cicchini were using it on the opening menu at Smuggler's Cove, which is a famous tiki place. One of the few one of the few cocktails on their list that wasn't made with rum was the Norwegian Paralysis, which was appropriately named. So it's always been it's in Death and Co. always has a couple cocktails. PDT always had at least one with Krogstad, and so it's out there. Aviary, and it's like literally in the best cocktail bars.
It's got flavors you just cannot get from anything else.
Yeah, and it works spectacularly in cocktails. And
do you prefer it though? Just from a cocktail perspective, what's your take on it? Do you prefer it neat or?
I typically drink it neat just because that's my, that's my genetics. But I love it in cocktails, and that's really, it's the cocktail movement that's really responsible for the growth of aquavit in this country. It's not that there are suddenly more Scandinavian Americans eating pickled herring.
I'm
there is that too. Yeah, I am
absolutely.
Yeah. But that's the sort of the neat, chilled, neat shots with pickled herring is this sort of obvious application for it. It's these cocktails that are, some of
they're surprising. They really are.
Yeah.
Really?
So that's been a really fun development, and seeing how that's come about, it's pretty fun. So
I just can't help but I bring it up. I do a column for Craft Spirits magazine, and I think I've brought up aquavit in probably a quarter of them that I've done, just because I'm like, they it's better than gin because people don't have any preconceived notions. They can say, well, I really like a more fennelly aquavit.
Yeah.
No, they don't, because they don't know. They don't freaking know.
Right.
So anyway, and of course it's a white spirit, so boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we also have a barrel aged version, the Gamla, which means old.
Right. Yeah.
So it's aged in ex Oregon Pinot Noir casks. It's really nice.
Wow. Yeah, I think I have a bottle. You sent me a bottle of that. I'll have to take that out. I remember taking a sip of it and like, and moving on. But
try it again.
I will. The box, all the aquavit is right behind me, so that'll be easy to do. Okay, I'm done with the aquavit. We can get back to malt now.
Okay.
Go ahead, Liz. Sorry, I'm sorry.
So the varietal you mentioned was Oregon Promise.
Oregon Promise, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's spring, or is it facultative?
It's spring. I think it's spring. I don't think it'll overwinter. I don't know. Maybe it'll overwinter here.
Okay. Yeah, because I just know
get Pat Hayes. You should have Pat Hayes on this.
Does that make a difference in the flavor?
I don't know that it would. Maybe in that you'd harvest it earlier. It might. I don't know.
I don't know.
We might have to do an experiment.
I mean, I'm in.
Yeah.
Shocker.
Yeah. But it is the Oregon Promise is a cross between Golden Promise, obviously, as the name suggests, and Full Pint, which is a fairly new,
evocative name.
Which is a fairly new variety.
I've made single malt out of Full Pint, so I'm
nice.
Some of our most popular club releases here have been from 100% Full Pint. So it's just starting to work its way into the pipeline, the malting, the planting, the barley growing pipeline. But it's an approved variety, and the Amba or whatever has.
Oh, are they loosening up a little?
I mean, I'm not on the board anymore, so maybe no. I'm just, that was shade.
I always kind of get Ambla and Mambla confused for some reason.
Not going there.
No, AMBA, American Malted Barley Association. They're all great over there, and highly technical people. So,
as they should be.
Yeah. Exactly. So we've just got a few minutes left, and I want to just throw out there what's coming down the pike.
Always.
Oh man, we will be expanding our core lineup a little bit. So our core lineup at this point, is our, conveniently have the bottles here.
Of course.
There we go. Our flagship, original American single malt whiskey. We have the stout cask finish.
Yes.
And a Oregon Pinot Noir cask finish. We are going to be adding our cask strength to that lineup. There we go. The mirror thing. So 125 proof. It's delicious. Surprisingly drinkable at 125 proof. But you
why are you adding the cask strength? I asked because I'm actually doing a piece on that right now.
So it's a lot easier to add water than to take water out. And so I think it's really the biggest reason two reasons. One, it's kind of a feather in our cap that we can make a 125 proof whiskey that's so damn drinkable. But another is that, consumer preferences. I mean, people,
they want it.
The whiskey fanciers really like cask strength because it allows them to control how much water they add and so forth. And we're not making whiskey for ourselves. Oh, kind of.
I mean, but yeah.
Column B.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's just an opportunity to really give the people what they want. Whiskey pro popula.
Ooh, nice. Do you want to?
It's the only Latin I know.
Okay. Do you want to grab that question, Liz?
Yeah, so we do have a question. So again, Eric Owens, hey again. Thank you for joining us, by the way. For Christian, what do you think the new TTB regs for single malt will mean for the industry?
I mean, I think it's all good. I was there for discussing and deciding what the regs would be at the inception meeting of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission back in what was that now, 2016, I think. And I just think the most important benefit to having the regs is just it provides clarity to consumers, to retailers, so forth. So it's having this kind of classification. If something says American Single Malt Whiskey, it's made in America from a single distillery, from 100% malted barley, distilled to no more than 160 proof, aged in oak barrels smaller than 700 liters, and obviously bottled at 80 proof or more. You can read that on the label though. And so it still allows for quite a lot of innovation. We're not it's not strict about new wood or charred wood or size of barrel. It's not strict about it doesn't require that it be made in a pot still.
Which I love.
Yeah, you can use a column. You can use a hybrid pot column. You could use whatever else, a rotovap, I suppose.
If you want to do volume.
Yeah. And so it really leaves it up to the consumer to decide what's good. But it just provides a few guardrails and kind of forces a little bit of transparency, which I think transparency is good for the consumers. And I think it's good for the credible industry members.
Yeah, guardrails, but not stifling innovation. And I think that's a perfect balance, perfect Venn diagram of awesome.
We do unfortunately have to wrap up because I gotta run. I think Liz does too. Christian, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. It's great to see
anytime. Let's do it again.
Yeah, I mean, something.
Let's get Pat Hayes on here. Maybe we'll.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Again, Christian, thank you so much for joining us today. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
So we don't actually have a next week or a next episode. We're working on it.
Okay,
it's in process.
We should have episode next week. So
next week, 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
2 weeks. I stand corrected.
It's okay.
But, right. Just thank you everyone for joining us, and until then, cheers, guys.
We'll see you again.
Have a great.
Thanks again, Christian.
Right.
Bye.
All right.
Bye,
guys.